Gulliver's Travels, Part 1. A man who loved the sea long ago. There lived a man named Gulliver. He was kind, he was curious, and he loved the sea. Gulliver worked as a ship's doctor. He traveled from place to place, helping people and learning about the world. Each journey made his heart feel wide. At night, he would stand on the deck of the ship, listening to the soft sound of waves. The sea felt calm, the sky felt endless. One day, Gulliver joined a new voyage. The ship sailed far from land. Days passed slowly. Then one night, a strong storm arrived. The wind grew loud, the waves rose high, the ship moved sharply. Gulliver held on tightly, but the sea was stronger. The ship broke apart. Gulliver fell into the water. He did not panic. He floated, he swam, he trusted the sea. At last his body grew tired. The world faded into quiet darkness. Part 2. A very small world. When Gulliver opened his eyes, the sun was warm. The sky was clear. He lay on soft ground. Gulliver tried to move, but he could not. Something held him down. Thin ropes covered his arms and legs. He stayed still. He listened. Tiny voices filled the air, high-pitched, gentle, curious. Gulliver turned his eyes slowly. Standing around him were very small people. They were no taller than his hand. They wore bright clothes. They carried tiny tools. They were not angry. They looked amazed. Gulliver felt calm. He did not want to scare them. Slowly, he raised one finger. The little people stepped back. Then they laughed softly. One small person stepped forward. They spoke in a voice Gulliver did not understand, but the tone was gentle. Gulliver stayed still. He showed his empty hands. The small people relaxed. They brought him food, tiny pieces of bread, small cups of sweet drink. Gulliver smiled. He ate carefully. The little people clapped. As the sun moved across the sky, Gulliver felt safe. He had arrived in a very small world, a place called Lilliput, and the journey had only begun. Part 3. Life in the Small Land. Days passed gently in Lilliput. The small people watched Gulliver with care. They were curious, but they were also kind. Little by little, they loosened the ropes. Gulliver moved slowly, so no one would be afraid. He sat up. He smiled softly. The people brought him food each morning, tiny plates filled with tiny meals. Gulliver ate carefully, so nothing would fall. The small people laughed quietly and clapped their hands. Soon, they built a small house near Gulliver. It was not for him to live in, but for them to visit him safely. They spoke to him often. Their words were small and quick. Gulliver listened. He did not understand everything, but he understood their feelings. One day, the leader of the small people arrived. He wore a simple crown and walked with calm steps. He looked at Gulliver and spoke slowly. Gulliver bowed his head. He placed one hand over his heart to show respect. The leader smiled. From that day on, Gulliver was no longer a stranger. He was a guest. Part 4. A gentle goodbye. Gulliver stayed in Lilliput for some time. He learned their ways. He helped them when he could. Sometimes he carried small things across the land. Sometimes he sat quietly and watched their busy days. But as the weeks passed, Gulliver felt a gentle pull inside his heart. He missed the sea. He missed home. One quiet morning, Gulliver spoke to the leader. He pointed to the water. He placed his hand on his chest. The leader understood. The small people gathered by the shore. They brought Gulliver tools, wood, rope, sails made with care. Together, they worked slowly. A small boat took shape. When the boat was ready, the sun was low. The sea was calm. Gulliver knelt carefully so he could see everyone. He smiled. The small people waved. Some wiped their eyes. Gulliver stepped into the boat. The water moved softly beneath him. As the boat drifted away, Gulliver looked back. The small land grew smaller, but the kindness stayed large inside his heart. The wind filled the sail. The sea opened wide again, and Gulliver sailed on. Part 5. A very large world. After many quiet days on the sea, Gulliver's small boat reached land again. He stepped onto the shore. The ground felt firm. The air felt fresh. But something was different. The grass beneath his feet was very tall. The flowers were as high as his chest. Gulliver looked around slowly. In the distance, he saw a shape moving. It was a person, but not a small one. This person was very large. Each step shook the ground gently. Gulliver stood still. He did not feel afraid. He felt curious. The giant person noticed him. They bent down and looked closely. Their face was calm. Their eyes were kind. Carefully, they lifted Gulliver and placed him in a large hand. The hand felt warm and steady. Gulliver stayed quiet. He nodded politely. The giant smiled. Gulliver had arrived in a very large world, a land called Brobdingnag. Part 6. Small, safe, and remembered. In Brobdingnag, Gulliver lived carefully. Everything around him was big and slow. A cup felt like a bucket. A table felt like a hill. But the people were gentle. They spoke softly. They moved with care. A kind family watched over Gulliver. They made a small bed for him. They gave him food, cut into tiny pieces. Gulliver felt safe sometimes. He sat near the window and watched the wide land. The sky felt closer here. The world felt quiet. But as time passed, Gulliver felt another gentle pull. He remembered the sea. He remembered home. One day, as Gulliver rested outside, a large bird flew overhead. Its wings were wide. It swooped down and lifted Gulliver into the air. The wind rushed softly around him, but before fear could rise, the bird loosened its grip. Gulliver fell down, down, until, splash, the sea caught him gently. A ship sailed nearby. Sailors saw him and pulled him aboard. Gulliver lay on the deck, listening to the waves. The sun warmed his face. He was safe again. That night, as the ship moved quietly forward, Gulliver looked up at the stars. He thought of the small land. He thought of the large land. He smiled. The world was wide. The world was kind. And wherever Gulliver traveled, he carried that kindness with him. The sea rocked the ship softly. His eyes grew heavy. The journey rested, and sleep came gently. Part 7. The way home. The ship sailed steadily across the quiet sea. Days passed without storms. Nights were calm and wide. Gulliver rested on the deck, wrapped in a warm blanket. The sailors spoke softly. The waves moved in slow rhythm. Gulliver felt thankful for the small land where people showed kindness, thankful for the large land where he learned to be patient and gentle. Sometimes he closed his eyes and remembered the tiny voices of Lilliput. Sometimes he remembered the warm hands of Brobdingnag. Each memory felt calm, each memory felt safe. One evening, as the sun sank into the sea, Gulliver saw the shape of land. Home. The ship moved closer. Lights appeared along the shore. The harbor felt familiar and still. When Gulliver stepped onto the land, his heart felt full. He walked slowly, listening to the sounds of home. The sea whispered behind him. The journey across the water had ended. Part 8. A quiet heart. Gulliver returned to his house. The door opened easily. Inside, everything felt just the right size. The table, the chair, the bed. Gulliver smiled softly. That night he sat by the window and looked at the stars. They were the same stars he had seen from the ship, but now they felt closer. Gulliver thought about his travels. He did not think about danger. He did not think about fear. He thought about people, small people, large people, kind people. He learned that the world could be very different and still very gentle. He learned that being small or being large did not matter. What mattered was how we treat one another. Gulliver lay down in his bed. The room was quiet. The night air moved softly through the window. He closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. The sea rested inside his dreams, calm and endless. The journey was complete, and Gulliver slept peacefully, carrying the wide, kind world inside his heart. The night remained still.